Chapter 29. A Failed Wish. Soon the smile left Matthias's face, and he looked at Lila with a cold, harsh glare. She involuntarily gasped. Then, feeling that she no longer had the confidence to look at him anymore, she fixed her eyes on her coffee cup and said,
"I'll leave then."
"Pardon?"
"I won't be staying there anymore. I'll leave and won't be a bother in your estate."
"Where are you going?"
"Anywhere but there."
She clenched her fists to stop her hands from shaking. "Don't be afraid," she told herself, even though she knew it was no use.
"Arvis isn't the only place I can live,"
she added, matching his cold tone. The Duke made no response, as if he found her words ridiculous. She felt like getting up and leaving right away, but suddenly something else that had happened the previous summer flashed into her mind. She remembered when, after she had refused to finish the food he had served her at his cabin, he had taken her hat and thrown it into the cold river. She didn't want to risk him reacting in a similar manner again, so she resolved to finish her coffee before leaving. Lifting the cup, she gulped down the hot drink, almost choking in the process. Once she could see the bottom of the cup, she gasped for air.
"Layla,"
he said in a low, threatening tone. She stiffly reached into her bag and retrieved some coins, which she then set on the table.
"What's that for?"
he asked, chuckling.
"It's to pay for my coffee."
"Do I seem like someone who needs to be reimbursed for a cup of coffee?"
"Maybe not, but I don't want you paying for my coffee, Your Grace."
Her fingers felt cold now, and her fingertips were turning white. She was persisting in her refusal to let him pay, however. They weren't at Arvis, after all.
"Look up."
"No."
"Look up, Layla."
"Don't order me around like that,"
she said, letting her anger show. She finally looked up at him. Her rage had wiped away her fear.
"I'm not your maid."
"My maid?"
"Just because I was raised by Uncle Bill at Arvis doesn't mean that I'm your maid."
"Really? Then what are you?"
"I'm nothing."
Tears started to form in her eyes.
"I always have been and always will be."
A sharp pain seared through her feelings right at the moment. Her moist green eyes glowered at Matthias. Even so, she still got a hold of him and confronted him squarely. He quietly held his coffee cup, thinking back to the day he had wanted to wring her neck. That late summer afternoon when he had felt every bit as dirty as his clothes had gotten after rolling around on the ground with that worthless woman. What if I had gone ahead and strangled you that day? I probably wouldn't feel as bad as I do right now, clinging to this nothing woman because of an inexplicable impulse. He took the coin she had placed on the table and stood up. Walking over to her, he slowly placed the money on her lap.
"Take it and leave."
Looking up at him, her eyes grew more tearful. Staring down at her, he took a few gold coins from his pocket and tossed them onto her lap as well.
"And this too."
"What are you—"
"You should say thank you, Layla,"
he said, smirking. Her eyes continued to tear up.
"That's what you say when Claudine pays you, isn't it? You always thank her politely."
Her lip twitched as if she wanted to make a retort, but no sound came out of her mouth.
"Since I took up your precious time when you're not my maid, it's only right that I pay you for your troubles."
She gritted her teeth, but couldn't stop the tears from starting to flow.
"If you don't want to think of it that way, think of it as alms for a poor orphan."
The tears streaming down her cheeks looked like gems.
"You love a guy who has offered to marry you out of pity, and yet you're too proud to accept a few measly coins. Ridiculous."
Not wanting to back down, she continued to glare at him, but the tears continued to flow down her cheeks. Feeling relief, he walked toward the exit of the cafe. Layla hadn't smiled for him, but at least she hadn't been able to resist crying. If I can't make you smile, making you cry will have to do. Either one is as good as the other to me. If all I can give you is tears, that is what I'll give you. If I can give you pain, I'll give you that too. Then at least you won't be able to ignore my existence." Before exiting the cafe, he looked over his shoulder at her one last time. She had removed her glasses and set them on the table. and was sobbing into her hands. As he sauntered out of the Natural History Museum, he made 2 wishes. The first wish was that she would get married to the doctor's son as soon as possible, so that she would be out of his life for good. The second wish was that she would never forget the tears and pain he had caused her. The sun was nearly set, but Lila still hadn't returned to the hotel. Kyle, who had come to have dinner with her, stepped out of the hotel's front door with a worried look on his face. She wasn't a child, but she didn't know the city, and he knew that there were shady types all over, just waiting for an innocent out-of-towner to prey upon.
Well, she's fearless, but still.
He anxiously started running down the street. He had assumed she would still be at the museum, but when he got there, it was already closed. He looked all around the building's surroundings, but she was nowhere in sight. Could she have gotten lost? He started running faster, or could she have run into a criminal? This horrible thought made his heart sink. Just then, however, he found her, standing in front of a fountain in a park at the end of the street the museum was on. She appeared to be tossing a coin towards the bronze statue at the center of the fountain.
Lila!
He shouted. She turned her head towards him.
Huh? Kyle?
She seemed surprised to see him, as if it hadn't occurred to her that he would have been worried.
What are you doing here?
Sweeping his sweaty hair off his forehead, he approached her.
Why did you come all the way here?
She asked.
Shouldn't you be studying for the exam?
Huh. That's your concern right now? You really... Hewley, you...
He put his hand on her shoulder as he panted. Eventually, he caught his breath.
Are you all right, Kyle? Want to sit down?
She asked, observing his face with worry. She's worried about me right now? He thought to himself. Reaching up, he put his hot, sweaty hands on either side of her face and let out a sigh mixed with some hollow laughter. That was when he noticed that her eyes were a little swollen.
Lila, have you been crying?
No.
Her quick, terse response confirmed it for him.
Why were you crying?
I wasn't.
Who made you cry?
I said I wasn't crying. Ugh.
Grinning at him, she brushed his hands away from her face.
I just looked around the museum, then I took a walk around this park, and made wishes at the fountain.
Wishes?
Yeah. I saw people doing that.
She pointed at the fountain. Bright, smiling people were making wishes and tossing coins into it.
One of my wishes was for you to get into medical school.
Does the coin have to get in there for the wish to come true?
He asked, chuckling as he pointed at the basin the statue was holding. He had noticed the disappointed cries of people whose coins had missed the basin.
Don't worry, I made it in every time.
She proudly replied.
I'm a natural at this kind of thing.
That doesn't surprise me.
Hey, it's already dinner time. Are you hungry? I'll just make one more wish and then we can go.
Holding a shiny gold coin in her hand, she walked up to the front of the fountain. He rushed after her.
Lila, have you been throwing gold coins? You're usually so frugal.
Instead of replying, she simply tossed the coin with all her might. However, it missed. It bumped against the outer edge of the basin and fell into the base of the fountain. She let out a devastated cry.
I thought you were a natural.
I made every single one before this into the basin.
How many gold coins did you throw?
He asked, laughing at this side of Layla he hadn't seen before.
Fine. Since you've already helped out the City of Rats by making such a large donation to its fountain, I might as well throw one myself.
Hey, stop!
She shouted, putting her hand over the hand with which he had just retrieved a coin from his pocket.
Don't waste money like that!
You're really saying that to me when you've just thrown away all those gold coins?
Those coins were expendable.
I didn't realize there were expendable and non-expendable coins.
There are,
she firmly shouted.
Don't throw it. It's a waste. I'd rather you spent it on ice cream.
Now you sound like the Layla I know.
He put the coin back in his pocket.
Let's go, Layla.
Even though he knew she would reject it, he offered her his hand. She made it as if she was going to clasp his hand, but then just tapped it and walked ahead of him. He increased his pace to catch up with her.
So, what did you wish for?
I wished for Uncle Bill's health and happiness, and for you to get into medical school and become a good doctor, and for me to become an outstanding adult. I made it into the basin for all of these.
What about the last one?
Huh?
The last wish? The one where you missed the basin?
Oh, that.
Her smile was replaced with a serious expression.
That's a secret.
She shook her head as if ridding herself of an unpleasant thought, then started walking with longer strides. Kyle decided against pressing her about the final wish. Smiling cheerfully, he said,
Let's go get something good to eat, Lila. I'm so hungry after running all over looking for you.
Dr. Etman opened his bedroom door with a sigh. Turning on the lamp, he saw his wife lying on the bed. She had been lying there continuously since Kyle and Lila had left for Rats to take the college entrance exam.
"Dinner's ready, honey,"
he said.
"Let's go."
"Leave me alone," she said in a forceful tone that seemed at odds with her feeble appearance.
"I understand how you feel, honey, but—"
"No," she said, cutting him off. "You don't understand. The kind, generous Dr. Etman could never understand." She sat up in bed and glared at him angrily.
"You like Layla too, don't you, honey?"
"Sure I do. Layla's a great kid. If it weren't for you and Kyle, I would have nothing but goodwill towards her."
"Nothing is changing about her just because she's marrying Kyle, honey. All that's happening is Kyle is marrying that great kid whom he so dearly loves."
You might think of me as shallow and materialistic for saying this, but marriage is real life. You've approved a marriage for our son that will lower his social status.
"The world is changing, honey. The social status that you're referring to will soon be a thing of the past."
"No, never," she firmly replied, as she put her hair up into a tidy bun. She got out of bed and stood in front of her husband. For all the meals she had missed over the last few days, she looked surprisingly alert and full of strength. "Social status will never disappear from human society. Even if aristocratic titles are abolished, people will come up with some other way to decide who's above and who's below."
"Honey."
"And no matter what that new system is, Layla and our Kyle won't match. This is a fact that will never change." With these cold words, Mrs. Etman brushed past her husband. Dr. Etman watched his wife as she walked out to the garden. When he noticed that their housekeeper was standing nearby, he gave her an awkward smile.
"I'm sorry, Mrs. Becker. You can clear the dinner table."
Quietly sighing, he walked out into the dark garden to stand with his wife.
AudiosKoppo